rather snappy, won't you? I have some very heavy thinking to do before 10 o'clock.
You've done well so far, but up until now, I've only been using a mere 5% of my power. Now let's see how well you fare against my Biden blast.
Are we having fun yet?
Hell yeah! While you and I are talking this very minute, some slimy, green-headed, 12-legged creep could be crawling into the White House. After all, if our national leaders were elected on the basis of tricky slogans, our country would be in a terrible mess.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast version of By the Ballot, where every month I'll be bringing on a new guest to talk about all things happening in politics, organizing, and news on the left. This month, we're going to be shaking things up a bit and merging two of our segments together with our monthly conversation and our series on the Regressive Evangelism of America. This month, I am joined by policy expert, an excellent podcaster in his own right, and our Appalachian neighbor in Tennessee, Chuck Corra. Welcome, Chuck.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yeah. So Chuck is the host of Appodlachia, which is a great show that I subscribe to. And he is also the author of the Substack No Elegy Needed. So go ahead and subscribe to those if you have not already. But Chuck, for those who don't know you, just give us a background on Appodlachia and what you're working on.
Yeah. So Appodlachia was started with my former co-host, still good friend, Big John Eisner, back in 2019. So we've been around quite a while, it feels like now. In fact, we're coming up on, I think it's going to be our 6-year anniversary.
Wow, congrats.
Thank you. It's hard to believe. So we started the show back then because we wanted to provide some type of voice for people on the left in Appalachia, because it's a region of the country that is certainly not associated with left-wing politics. And, you know, at the time and still even today, there's just not a lot of resources like that for people who are from Appalachia to have like a voice on the left. And we wanted to be that. And, you know, I think we've done it to at least a reasonable degree of success. Because it started when my co-host ran for office. He ran one of the reddest districts in West Virginia for the State House of Delegates. He lost, but he did better at the time than any other Democrat had ever done. And the issues that we brought up during that campaign, because I helped run it, were some of the ones we wanted to continue talking about. And so we try to talk about issues in Appalachia that people aren't talking about, provide a political analysis that's to the left, and, you know, have fun with it. I mean, it's not all deeply super serious. Some of it is, but I think that Appalachia has often been forgotten about. It's been disregarded and throughout history, and it's been neglected and, quite frankly, abused by government powers. And I don't think that there's ever really been a media outlet that has been specifically addressing issues in Appalachia like we have. And so I take a lot of pride in that. And that's really the origin story of this. And I think as we progress into 2026, we're going to be ramping up and hopefully be bigger than ever. So I'm excited.
Excited to hear it. Like I said, I listen regularly and love all the things that you guys are doing over there. So keep up the good work as always. But I'm very excited to have you on today because over the past couple of months, I started a series on what I believe is lending to much of today's political fracture into a lot of the regressive policies in America today, which is Christian nationalism, which I know is something you've also talked about. But I've always been fascinated by the influence of religion on political beliefs, having gone through a Jesuit education as a Catholic myself, which is one of the more socially liberal sects of Catholicism. But as I read more about the influence of Christian nationalism, especially after a lot of the current right-wing politicians are identifying as Christian nationalists outright now, as if it's not a bad thing. But, you know, evangelical Christianity in America, on everything from public education to the Supreme Court, I definitely have found more of a darker narrative in there based off of that. So what, in your understanding, is Christian nationalism?
So I'll give you like my understanding, but then I'll give you my opinion. I mean, Christian nationalism is a right-wing ideology that believes that the United States was founded on Christian principles as a Christian nation, and that's the way it should be. That's how a lot of it is framed. And, that sounds good to people who may not really be dialed into it or who may think like, oh, Christian principles like love thy neighbor, awesome. But what I believe it really is an attempt for primarily white men, to control people and to impose their very conservative religious beliefs on other people. And in this case, as a feature of our government. And what I mean by that is like, the Christianity can be interpreted a lot of ways, but there are a lot of like very arcane and I think antiquated beliefs that some people practice. I mean, if you want to page through Leviticus, you can find many of them.
Right.
But what these people try to do is under the veneer of Christianity, they want to control people and they want to be in charge and impose their values on people. And so we're seeing an uptick in that, I think, just in our government in general, because I believe that J.D. Vance is a Christian nationalist and an asshole, but I don't know which one ranks higher. Probably asshole. But I think like too that there are people that are in the private sector that believe in this, as we know. And a lot of it is also rooted in misogyny. I think part of the reason why we're seeing such an uptick in people being so public about Christian nationalism is because they're seeing women gain too much power. I mean, it was not that long ago that like woman could not have a credit card or a checking account without the permission of her husband. And so we've come a long way since then. And I think there's a lot of people that see that and are outraged, disgusted, and scared by it. And which is pathetic, of course, but these people are starting to gain a lot of power, and a lot of them have money. And that's another big important part. And so I see it a lot in our government. Oh, the other name I should mention is Russell Vogt, who is the director of the Office of Management and Budget, which is one of the most important and influential agent. It's not even really an agency. It's a division of the executive branch in our federal government, but one basically in charge of implementing Project 2025. He is a massive Christian nationalist, and we're seeing his influence, his ideology and his influence play out in a lot of, parts of our lives now. And so it's dangerous. It's very primarily the first thing and the only thing that you need to take away from this, if anything, is that it's dangerous.
Yeah, Russell Vogt, who's also star of a lot of AI videos on Trump's social media nowadays.
Awesome.
But so, kind of on that same, on the digital side. So I started off with digital influencers, which obviously meant looking into kind of the strange bedfellows of the Christian right. Between, for instance, like the Groypers and incel sect of the internet, which have crossed paths with and maybe allegedly shared some group chats with one of your favorite people who you already mentioned, J.D. Vance.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Whom I know you have, like you had mentioned, for a lack of a better term, quite a particular fondness for, let's say. But him
and I go way back.
But, one thing I know, which will lend itself into kind of the bigger portion of today, is that, J.D. Vance, in some way, shape, or form, kind of spans the divide between Appalachia and Silicon Valley. So, like, not to spring too much of a loaded question on you, but, the Christian nationalist type of thinking he has, whether he's talking about his weird obsession with, like, the birth rate, or the weird misogynistic type of thinking about women, like how he basically tried to say that he wants his wife to convert to his faith in front of a bunch of people at a Turning Point event. And that kind of prosperity gospel that Vance also subscribes to, which, as a fellow Catholic, as JD claims to be, makes zero fucking sense to me at all. But do you think that thinking is something that's shared in Appalachia, like he touts in his backstory, or do you think it comes more from that Silicon Valley types like Elon Musk and, also J.D. Vance, his mentor and also self-proclaimed Antichrist expert, Peter Thiel?
That's a good question. And I'll premise it by saying that J.D. Vance is the through line for all of this. The connection you made with Silicon Valley is extremely important because that's oddly enough where a lot of this ideology is coming from, or at least is being professionalized from. And JD Vance is someone who is very talented at putting a pretty face, or I should say like a glossy professionalism to what is a monstrous ideology. He can make himself sound like a reasonable guy and a normal person while espousing these horrific, disgusting, regressive views. And as far as like if it's something in Appalachia, I mean, I can't speak to that directly. I will say that like in my experience, I think that the control aspect of it is not one that I think is naturally occurring here. I think Appalachia is a very is a religion, or excuse me, not a religion, is a region that is it's built on self-reliance because it's a region that's been forced to rely on themselves and not the government and not anything else. But what I will say is that like churches play a very important role as a community pillar in Appalachia, not as a way of like instilling Christian nationalism, but like as a place where people congregate, a place where community services can be provided, mutual aid can be provided. But I don't see like the ideology of Christian nationalism naturally happening there, because it's something that's built out of it's constructed in a think tank, for lack of a better word, and it's one that the danger of it though is I think that it could take a foothold fairly easily because of how nefariously it is wrapped in a Christian ideology. And so that's what I worry about. And I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it, but like, I think that that's why certain Silicon Valley tech, rich people are coming to Appalachia, buying up a bunch of land and trying to start these weird, like vassal communities of these pseudo-independent states in Appalachia that is espousing Christian nationalism and trying to normalize it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's, the reason why, I brought that up and, kind of the Silicon Valley venture capitalist types and also, their connection with JD Vance and that being, like you said, the through line to Appalachia, and why I reached out to you about this specifically because back in August, you wrote a piece on No Elegy Needed, which is your Substack, and you called it was called Christian Nationalists Are Building Their Own Towns in Appalachia, and it should scare you. And it was a shocking thing to read personally in 2025. But can you explain to our listeners what exactly is going on with these Christian nationalists in terms of creating their own towns like this?
Yeah. So, in credit where it's due, Phil Williams, who is one of the great journalists in this country, based out of Nashville. I used to live in Nashville, so I'm very familiar with Phil Williams. He works for News Channel 5. He is one of the most talented investigative reporters in this country, in my opinion, and he has been following this story for a very long time. Basically, I mean, to sum it up, what's happening is there's these people in Silicon Valley that made their money and, doing venture capital, basically, that have decided that Tennessee is an ideal location to start their own little Christian nationalist communities. And in fairness, it is an ideal location for that when you think of the people that are in charge of the state. Bill Lee is not going to give them any trouble. The state lawmakers aren't going to give them any trouble. Marsha Blackburn's not. And Bill Haggerty is out getting a firmware update somewhere, so he's not going to be doing anything. So what they're doing is they're buying a bunch of land in these rural counties and starting these like charter communities. Essentially, they're building out. They make it look like it's just a regular housing development, right? Like there's one. It's called a Ridge Runner. It's an affiliate of New Founding, which is this BC Christian Nationalist BC company, and they bill themselves as pioneering a new model for local life in the digital age. And what they're trying to do is interweave like basically crypto with Christian nationalism. And they're trying to do as much of like starting their own community under their own charter and their own laws as they can get away with. And I mean, I liken it almost to like the FLDS people, the fundy Latter-day Saints, where like they have these large communities in Texas where like, we have religious freedom in this country under the First Amendment. It's a great thing. But when taken to its extreme, it's not awesome. And I think like they're trying to build something similar to like a XYZ ranch type situation. I'm not implying that they're going to be doing the same things as Warren Jeffs did, but
Right.
like I think they want to have almost a system of self-governance, and that's what they're going for, because they're like, we have certain values that we want to live by. Let's buy up this super cheap land near Gainesboro, Tennessee, and do our own thing. And it's troubling because like it just shows like how professionalized and institutionalized Christian nationalism is, and it's something where this is one of their ways of spreading it and proliferating it in different parts of the country, that they believe that there is an audience for it. And I don't think they're wrong about that. I think that they're, if you paint this in a particular way, there will be people that will be receptive to it because they'll see it as an extension of their Christian faith. And there's a lot of people that are Christians in rural Tennessee where this is going to be. And so I think it's a huge problem because it is just showing like what they're trying to do. They're trying to take over parts of the state, parts of the region, and instill this ideology in a way that is part of people's daily lives, but also is to normalize it. And I think that that's the part that people should be concerned about, because these people, like, one of their biggest things is like women are not on the same level as men. Like that's it's basically spelled out by them. I think one of their founders was like, yeah, women don't need jobs. They should just be, providing for the man and raising children and that kind of thing. Like painting it off as a trad wife situation when what really it is it's misogynistic control. And I think that they have the money to do this. They have the law on their side to at least start these communities. I mean, they can't, engage in self-government, but you can run, like an HOA style situation that you can get away with a lot when you don't have prying government eyes. And they're definitely not going to have that, at least from the state government and from the governor, who himself is probably a Christian nationalist.
Right. So, you kind of said a little bit about, when you're talking about that one development, but like who are kind of the funders of these projects and like where are they coming from specifically, and like how, like, how did they make their money and do all that?
So if I recall correctly, I mean, I think that they made it like doing venture capital stuff in Silicon Valley, but like being like anti-woke venture capitalism. And then they found people that, like they've got people that are doing that in like finance industry, but then combining it with people who are like fundamentalist pastors and stuff. And so I believe that that's where they made most of their money, at least for this particular group. That's my understanding. And it allows them to do things like this. Like it gives them the power to be able to buy up a bunch of property and make these communities. And I think like when I mentioned that, like they're very extreme. Like this one particular organization has like these two far right pastors, and this is a credit again to Phil Williams, where he was going through like some of their social media and their podcasts and stuff, and they believe that before this, like they want to go back to an America that's before the civil rights movement, because they believe that, quote, the civil rights movement ruined everything. And that the only people who have a legitimate right to a homeland here in the U.S. are so-called heritage Americans, which means white people. And so this is like that. We've seen this iconography a lot from the White House, for example, where they show these like AI generated bullshit propaganda of like a white family with a white picket fence and like sort of this 50s aesthetic, like Mad Men type thing.
Yeah.
And this is what those people are going for. Like they believe that if you're white, you have a claim to the United States, whereas if you're not, then you don't. And in particular, if you're a white man. And so I think that their fantasy is to create a world before the civil rights movement, before black people had rights, before women had rights, because to them that was peak America. When white men ruled everything, it was peak America, and they want to go back to that. They believe that like that whole like movement in the 60s ruined everything for them. and they think that this is a way for them to do it. And I just feel like it's not gotten a lot of attention because so much of like the ideology in the Republican Party is built upon a foundation of Christian nationalism. And while I think the general public, if they were to understand the full breadths of Christian nationalism, would probably reject it, I would hope at least, they're able to get away with it because they can wrap it in a really nice veneer of, oh, this is just Christianity and we're a Christian nation and we have Christian values. And so it's very troubling, and the lack of attention, I think, at the national level is also a huge problem because, I mean, these are people that have some of the most disgusting beliefs that you can imagine, and they're starting to get more sway in our society, especially like just to like put a fine point on this. I mean, it and I'm not being hyperbolic. If you look at Nick Fuentes, who is a Holocaust denier, white nationalist, who is also Christian nationalist, he is starting to get a lot more play. He used to be a fringe person in the Republican Party. Now he is muscling his way to being a main player in it after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And so this creeping of Christian nationalism is starting to become a flood.
Yeah, I mean, you said it with Fuentes going and being able to go talk to someone like Tucker Carlson, who was before, like the bow tie wearing MSNBC guy, and now all of a sudden he's this, cabin dwelling mountain man. All of a sudden is just very, very odd. But one of the parallels, that I drew from that piece, was the existence of like two different historical movements where something like this had happened before. So the first one was the idea of like the far right apocalypticism for these evangelical Christians, right? Where they basically think that any day now could be the end of days. Like, I think the rapture was supposed to be like a month ago or something.
Yeah.
As I recall. But we have seen these kinds of groups pop up before. They secede from society. They stockpile weapons. They go into secluded spot to wait out the end of days. I studied apocalypticism and religious terrorism when I was in college, and I read a lot about them, which was a choice, especially being at school in Harrisonburg, which is located in the Shenandoah Valley, which a lot of these groups are based in. But the most notable of those groups would be like the Branch Davidians, which were the target of the botched and mishandled federal raid at Waco, which became a national spectacle. But another group I mentioned to you when I was talking to you over email was the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord, or CSA is how they're called. So, which was a far-right, apocalyptic, anti-government survivalist militia that came from a community church. It was a Baptist congregation in Missouri, and they moved to a 224-acre compound in rural Marion County in northern Arkansas to create what they called the farm, where they aimed to train like an army to fight off the hordes of the masses that they believed would be coming after being displaced after Armageddon, and naturally would flee from the city centers to the mountains. They were very anti-Semitic, didn't believe in the federal government. They were kind of the movement that coined Zog, or like the Zionist occupied government kind of stuff that they would throw out all the time. So they wanted to create their own government, create their own military, so that they were very sophisticated, obviously. But like what you're talking about right now, purchase a lot of amounts of land in a rural area that was very cheap. So I know far-right militias are always on the mind of people out in Appalachia, out in rural America in general, but do you think that kind of thinking, that apocalyptic thinking, is fueling that kind of secession from society, or is it something else that you think?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's definitely a pretext for them to be able to do what they want to do. Whether or not they actually believe it or whether or not they're using it as justification. I mean, I think there's definitely some that are true believers for sure. And it's something that can have some appeal in a place like Appalachia, where there is a rugged individualism. There is a rejection of like, the government's not going to help us, not going to save us, that kind of thing. But it also aligns like with how Christian nationalists are trying to frame themselves in general. I mean, I think a big point of conversation has been like Christian nationalists, like many of them are anti-Semites, but many of them are very, very supportive of the state of Israel and of the Jewish people, because it is essential to their prophecy, right? Like in a lot of their beliefs, I think it's called like dispensationalism.
Yeah,
I want to say.
dispensationalism.
Yeah, like they believe the modern state of Israel fulfills their prophecy and Jewish survival is necessary for end times, but they don't believe that Jewish people necessarily should exist. They think they believe they should be converted to Christians.
Hmm.
And so in a lot of ways, it's like a deeply anti-Semitic thinking, but they also are presenting themselves as very pro like Israel, pro Judaism, because it's essential to their prophecy. And I find that to be really cynical and terrible, but it also just shows that like how much of this is interwoven into our politics. And I think it's very disturbing. But to your point, like I think that they see, you know, establishing something that is like a theocracy type situation as being ideal for them. They
Right.
think that like they can be the government, and if they have to start with these small like communities, these little fiefdoms or whatever you want to call them, that's how they're going to do it. And I think that they view that as the model moving forward. So I haven't seen a lot of indication, at least with the group that I've mentioned, that they're planning to do something where it was like more like arming themselves. I think that that's definitely a part of it, though, because I like, you know, having your own militia is something that is very much like, as you mentioned, like with Branch Davidians and there's other sects of Christianity, or if you want to even call it that, like it is viewed as necessary. And I
Right.
think like these are people that already like are rabid gun owners, like very hardcore 2A guys, and you know, like they believe like this is their right, even though like we reject the other parts of the government, but we like this one, which is, you know, part and parcel to a lot of how Christians view the Bible, is like you cherry pick the parts that are good for you and then you ignore the parts that aren't. And so I do think that part of it is going to have some sway in parts of Appalachia. It's like, because like you can see the appeal if you're someone who's not dialed into like politics and this kind of stuff. You can see the appeal of like, oh, this is a community that's like built around Christianity, and we, you know, love thy neighbor. We wish that America had Christian values, and so that's what we're gonna be role modeling in our community. And you can see where like somebody who, you know, doesn't know like the full extent of Christian nationalism, you can see that and be like, yeah, that's what I want for my life and for my kids. And you know, as any cult operates, like that's how you get people in. That's how you reel in a fish. And then once you're in, it's very easy to start controlling people and to start indoctrinating them into this ideology. And I think that I believe that is their model that they're using.
Yeah. So on the other hand, like, you know, I said two different kind of movements. So like on the other one that I was mentioning, one thing, you know, you talked about Phil Williams and his investigative reporting that he did outside of Nashville, and you had one piece that you mentioned before that you had a passage in your piece that you wrote from him that read, they want to go back to an America before the civil rights movement ruined everything. They want to kick out legal immigrants, even if they became U.S. citizen decades ago. And they want to put women back where they think they belong. As Andrew Isker and C.J. Engel see it, the only people who have a legitimate right to a homeland here in the United States are so-called heritage Americans, like the white people depicted in Norman Rockwell art from the past. They celebrate images of whites-only diners in the 1950s, with Engel proclaiming that the 1960s ruined everything. And what that reminded me of, so CSA was also a part of a larger movement called the Christian Identity Movement that had a lot of these far-right groups in it. And they aligned with an ideology of Posse Comitatus, which seems to be kind of like the far-right equivalent of Antifa, in that it's not an organized like organization, but everyone subscribes to that same mentality. And this really came to prominence in the 1990s, around the same time as Ruby Ridge and the Oklahoma City bombing. But it was an anti-federal government movement basically where they believe that, in their words, there is no legitimate form of government above that of the county level and no higher law authority than the county sheriff. If the sheriff refuses to carry out the will of the county citizens, he shall be removed by the posse to the most populated intersection of streets in the township, and at high noon be hanged by the neck, the body remaining until sundown as an example to those who subvert the law. This, of course, spurred the 21st century like sovereign citizen movement and the American militia movement. So you were talking about, how they're making all of these, basically these communities so that they can do what they want. You said like basically the highest right now would be like an HOA level. But is this like sort of mentality of that kind of posse comitatus, like the sheriff being the highest level of authority in the area, is that, you think, what they're kind of like building towards in this community?
I wouldn't be surprised, and I guess like don't quote me on the HOA thing because I don't know if that's. I think that it's probably possible that they could establish maybe their own unincorporated community or something of that nature. I'm not really sure. I'm not very good on the local domain laws of Tennessee, unfortunately. But I mean, look, what you described sounds like Gilead to me. If you've
Right.
ever read
Yeah.
or watched The Handmaid's Tale, and that is like that's the dream for a lot of these people. That's 100% the dream. Gilead is like their utopia, and so when it comes to stuff like that, I mean, I think that they would love to have that. And honestly, if they can't deal their own self-government in these communities, like it would not shock me if they tried to pull together people to run for office with this kind of
Right.
ideology as well. And I mean, I imagine that they would probably be successful in it. Or at least like if their movement is not brought the sufficient amount of attention that it needs to form detractors, then you could see where they could do that. I think there was something like that happening in Oregon with this cult that was trying to like take I can't remember the details of it, but I believe
Was that was like Wild Wild Country, I think,
yeah,
that Netflix
yeah.
documentary? Yeah, they were trying to have people run for local office and enforce new laws, basically, was that. Yeah. So, I mean, you could think like in a similar way, you could flood a county with a bunch of new residents where
Yeah.
you could run people for office and have a pretty strong electorate.
It's not at all beyond the realm of possibility, especially for some of these communities. Like they're extremely smaller and they're very sparsely populated. Like some of these rural counties in Tennessee. I mean, you look at just like the numbers from like voting in the presidential election. I mean, they're minuscule. So you can see where something like a county sheriff or a local sheriff would you move in a couple hundred new people into a county and you can sweep those elections.
Right. Yeah. Especially like, the sheriff is elected in most places. I
Yeah.
think every single place elects the sheriff. So I know that that's something that definitely a lot of people have talked about before. You kind of referenced it a little bit in terms of like the land being bought up, but like what impacts should be expected in the Appalachian region with these kinds of developments happening, beyond just like, the like land being used up?
I mean, I think that they're going to try. Invade might be not the best word to use, but I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. I think they're going to try to invade these communities and do anything they can to impose their values on them. I don't think like they present themselves as just wanting to have their own like community, like neighborhood, plots of land. We're not going to bother anybody, that kind of thing. I don't buy that at all. I think that this is very deliberate. They chose Tennessee for a reason. They chose these locations in Tennessee for a reason. It's not just because the land is cheap and it's a beautiful part of Appalachia. It's because they're not like you couldn't do this in Washington State, which where one of them is from. You couldn't do this in San Bernardino County or something like that, or even in the more like Sutter County of California, because there'd be too much oversight. So they're going to a place where they're not going to be bothered or where they're going to be able to get away with this. And I think that you can see them try to exercise their influence on different institutions and, like we said, run for office, do other things where they can impose their ideology on a greater number of people. I think that like part of this is their prophecy with Christian nationalism, and in part the reason the way that they can impose their ideology on more people is that they can get more power. And so I think the people should expect that they're going to try to do everything they can to get more power and to just bring in more people. Like they're going to buy more land. They're going to buy, like, if this is successful for them, which it very well could be, they're going to buy more land. They're going to bring more people in. They're going to advertise this place as this Christian utopia. They're going to probably like run ads heavily in New York and in California and Illinois and be like, you know, this state doesn't comport with your values, come here, that
Right.
type of thing. And so I think that people can expect to see a lot more of this, and other people like these, like this Engel and Isker guy cropping up, not just in Tennessee but like in Kentucky and Virginia and other like Alabama, Georgia, all these, Mississippi, all these other states where, you know, maybe less so Virginia, but where the state government is not going to get in their way, not going to cause them a problem, and very likely supports what they're doing, as well as the state and local. And I think that we're going to see more of these people do that because like these people, they don't like living in California. It does not comport with their values, and they think like we can be the kings of our own kingdom in places like, I don't know, like Lawrence County, Tennessee, or wherever.
Right.
So I would not be surprised if we start seeing a proliferation of this type of movement in more rural parts of Appalachia and other states.
Yeah. You know, and today I saw a More Perfect Union put out something on like data centers, how those are like propping up all over the place.
Yeah.
So, you know, like people with money usually just kind of come into a place, buy up all the land, and then, you know, use it for what they want. So, you know, that seems to be the case here. And
with
kind
places
of,
with lax zoning laws, I mean,
Yeah.
you can do a lot if you have the money to buy land.
Right. Yeah. So I guess, you know, I try to make things actionable for people. So like what can be done, if anything, to push back against this kind of development? Or is it simply just hoping to raise enough awareness about it that people kind of, you know, like they say, sunlight is the best disinfectant. So if enough people are kind of outraged by it, then maybe it'll go away. But what do you, in your mindset, what is the best course of action here?
I think that raising awareness is a really big part of it because most people don't know that this is happening. Like specifically to this place in Tennessee, it's because of Phil Williams that most people know, or the people that do know. I mean, it's the reason I know because I follow Phil. And I think sharing it and making sure that more people understand that this is what's happening is a really important part of this, because right now, like the less that people know, like the easier it is for these people to get away with this kind of thing and start to do this and lay the groundwork that they need in order to be able to be a permanent fixture in these communities. Because the challenge is like everything they're doing is lawful right now. Like everything they're doing is very much above the board. And, you know, there's probably people in that county that welcome this in the sense that like they're bringing in tax revenue in places that, you know, desperately need it. So I think that making sure that people know who these people are is really important. And when it comes to like the example that we brought up with these people in Tennessee, like sharing this with anybody you know that lives in or around these areas, or even just in the state in general, like making sure they know that these people believe that Black people are inferior to them, that women are inferior to them, that the civil rights movement, in their view, was a bad thing that set this country back, and that only white men really have a claim to anything in this country. I think that's the most important thing that people can do right now, because this is not like super proliferated yet that I know of, but you can see where this could start happening, almost like HOA communities popping up around different parts of the country. So I think the more people know about this, the better. And I think that right now in this stage, like that's the most important thing that people can do, and that's the most actionable thing people can do. And following like Phil Williams, who has been covering this for a really long time, and making sure that like this isn't happening in their community. I think that right now is the biggest thing that people can do.
Yeah, I mean, you were saying before, like a lot of these communities are strapped for tax revenue, right? So anything that they are is kind of put in front of them, they kind of go, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Which unfortunately, I think, tying that to the data center stuff is why a lot of these communities end up with all these data centers,
Yeah.
because people in charge say, oh, well, they're talking about this tax revenue. Okay, I'll go for it. And then they kind of, reap what they sow. And all of a sudden it's kind of taking over their community. So yeah, I mean, I don't, when I read that, when I read the piece that you did, I was like, yeah, there's a non-zero chance that this goes beyond Tennessee into places
100%.
like West Virginia, especially, that a lot of these communities have been forgotten. I think of a place called Ivanhoe, Virginia, which is right there on the border of West Virginia and Virginia. That used to be a huge mining town, but they pulled out. So like there's nothing there anymore other than houses and like a few businesses, but that's about it. So yeah. Is there, I guess you said Phil Williams is probably our best bet. Is there anything else you could think of, sources of information? Obviously following you would be a great
Mhm.
idea, but anything else you can think of there to
I mean, I
point
think
people?
Phil Williams is probably the best at this point. And one of the reasons why Appalachia is such a focus here is because Appalachia has a lot of land that's private and able to be purchased. Like these people would probably they would guarantee they'd be looking at places like Idaho and Wyoming and those
Hmm.
western states, but a lot of the land there is publicly owned land. It's BLM land, and so their options are limited. And what's not is very expensive. So that's why like places like Appalachia where land is cheap, it's where they want to go. But yeah, I absolutely follow Phil Williams. I think he's the one that's been really covering this quite a bit.
Cool. Well, as we're wrapping up here, anything that you want to plug for Appodlachia or No Elegy Needed or anything that you're working on coming up?
Just follow us on all platforms. I'm on Appodlachia on basically every platform other than Substack. And Substack, it's No Elegy Needed. And yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chuck. Everybody, yes, please go like, subscribe, share, everything at Podlatcha. Make sure you also get some of their merch off of their store. I saw some of that. It looks awesome. So I really appreciate you taking the time and in talking through this with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been really, really great. I've enjoyed talking with you, Matt. And yeah, let's do it again sometime for sure.
Absolutely. You got it, man. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you all so much for watching and listening. That was a great conversation with Chuck. Really appreciated his time. Really appreciate everything he's doing over at Appodlachia. So remember to go like and subscribe to their podcast and their Substack. We are just rocking and rolling with these interviews, so I hope y'all are enjoying it, and we are going to keep bringing you these great conversations as well. Make sure to check out our crossover series with Michael O'Connor from the Dogwood News from earlier this week. Michael and I had a great time teaming up for those, and funnily enough, after we pushed our article on repealing right to work, Senator Jennifer Carroll Foy submitted her bill for repealing right to work that same day. So shout out to JCF for always fighting the good fights. And please make sure to push your own state senators and your own delegates to both support and vote for that bill. We need to make sure that we are helping out our brothers and sisters in labor by repealing these regressive laws. So please make sure that they are supporting the repeal of right to work. Also, I wanted to plug one thing that I will link to in the show notes. But as we head into the Thanksgiving and holiday season, there are a lot of folks who are hurting after having their SNAP benefits slashed and other sources of food being taken away. But the uncertainty of the tariffs also have affected a lot of people in terms of the prices that they're seeing at the grocery store, and the price of goods are being driven up by some of these tariffs. So Olivia Hathaway out in Augusta County from the Blue Ridge Young Democrats reached out and sent me this amazing interactive map to show where people can obtain food in case of high supermarket prices or shortages. Virginia is lucky to have so many farmers, and this map is just meant to catalog their wares all in one place. So make sure that you can see that map. We will link to it in the show notes. Like I said, you can find markets that accept SNAP and EBT as well. And also, if you produce or sell any kind of grocery good, you're eligible to be on the map. This includes things like honey, preserved foods, and not just produce. If you teach classes in growing, canning, or preserving food, you can also fill out their survey to make sure you get on there. Again, like I said, I'll link to this in the show notes, but this is just a really cool thing that one of our Virginia Young Democrats made, and I wanted to make sure that it got out in front of people because it can make someone's holiday a little bit easier while helping out our local farmers. So please check that out. We will be back with our regularly scheduled programming next week and with more great conversations as we head into the 2026 General Assembly session in January. So make sure to check that out. And until next time, we'll see y'all there. Bye-bye. Thank you for reading and listening to By the Ballot. By the Ballot is an opinion series published on Substack, written, hosted, and produced by Matt Royer. Our theme music is Blah 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 by The Revolution. All views expressed are solely those of the author and should not be interpreted as reporting or objective journalism or attributed to any other individual or organization. This publication represents personal commentary, analysis, and opinion only.